Destiny has a cruel way of playing with the human heart. It tears away what you love most when you least expect it, and then, years later, gives it back to you wrapped in circumstances you could never have imagined. This is the story of Matt, a businessman from Chicago who thought he'd lost his first love forever, of Sarah, a doctor who built her life on the ruins of a broken promise, and of Emma, a 4-year-old girl whose mysterious illness would not only put her life in danger, but unleash a chain of revelations that would change everything they thought they knew about love, betrayal, and the power of forgiveness. Because sometimes, when life backs you into a corner and you feel like there's no way out, the universe conspires to give you a second chance. But those chances come with a price. And in the cold corridors of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, between the smell of disinfectant and the constant sound of heart monitors, 3 lives are about to collide in the most unexpected way. What began as a desperate race to save a sick child would become an epic battle between true love and the lies that for 15 years kept 2 souls apart who were destined to be together. A story where every medical diagnosis will reveal a hidden truth, where every decision could mean the difference between life and death, and where they'll discover that the most dangerous enemies don't always come from outside, but sometimes sleep in the bed next to you. Get ready for a story that will take your breath away from the first line to the last revelation. The BMW engine was still running, but Matt wasn't moving. His sweaty hands gripped the steering wheel as he stared at the entrance to Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago. In the back seat, Emma was moaning weakly, her little body burning with fever. "Daddy, it hurts so much," murmured the 4-year-old, with dry lips and glassy eyes. Matt took a deep breath. Since Carol, his wife, had died, it had been just him and Emma. He couldn't fail her now. He turned off the engine, got out of the car, and carefully picked up his daughter. She rested her little head on his shoulder, so light it scared him. He crossed through the automatic doors of the emergency room, and the air conditioning hit them like a slap. A nurse approached immediately, but before she could speak, a firm voice echoed from the end of the hallway. "I'll handle this." Matt looked up and the world stopped. Walking toward him in a white coat with a stethoscope around her neck was the woman he'd loved since he was 17. The same one who had disappeared from his life without explanation 15 years ago. "Sarah," he whispered, unable to believe what his eyes were seeing. She froze in the middle of the hallway. Her brown eyes, the same ones that had made him sigh in high school, filled with surprise. For an eternal moment, only the 2 of them existed in that universe of white coats and fluorescent lights. "Matt," she murmured, with her mask half on. "Is it you?" But Emma brought them back to reality with a louder moan. Sarah immediately regained her professional composure and approached with determined steps. "What symptoms is she showing?" she asked, touching the child's forehead with expert hands. "High fever since yesterday, won't eat, trouble breathing and complaining of chest pain," Matt replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Sarah nodded without looking at him directly. "Follow me, please." As they walked down the hallway, Emma weakly lifted her head toward her father. "Daddy, my chest hurts so much," she whispered, and then without warning, her little eyes closed and her body collapsed completely in Matt's arms. "Emma!" Matt shouted as Sarah ran toward them. "Get her on the gurney, quick!" Sarah ordered 2 nurses who appeared immediately. Her years of experience took total control of the situation. With precise movements, she connected the pulse oximeter to Emma's pinky finger and checked her vital signs. The monitor emitted constant beeps that accelerated Matt's heartbeat. Rapid pulse, low saturation, temperature 103.6. Sarah murmured while examining the child's eyes with a small flashlight. "When exactly did the symptoms start?" "Day before yesterday afternoon, after we got back from Lake Geneva. I thought it was just fatigue from the trip," Matt replied, not taking his eyes off his daughter. Sarah frowned. She checked the lymph nodes in Emma's neck, then her throat, and finally placed the stethoscope on her small chest. What she heard worried her. The tests don't lie, Matt. This isn't a common flu, she said seriously, without looking up from the chart she was filling out. What do you mean? He asked, moving closer to the gurney. Your daughter could be very sick. I'd need to do more thorough studies, Sarah replied, and for the first time since they'd reunited, she looked him directly in the eyes. In that look, Matt saw the same determined girl he'd known in high school, the one who had always dreamed of being a doctor to save lives. But he also saw something else, a deep sadness that hadn't been there when they were 17. What kind of studies? Matt insisted. Chest X-ray, complete blood work, cultures. The symptoms Emma's showing match a condition I studied at. She stopped abruptly. That you studied where? Matt asked, intrigued. Sarah shook her head, as if wanting to push away a painful memory. It doesn't matter. What matters now is your daughter. Just then the room door burst open. An elegant 40-year-old woman in a beige pantsuit and heels that clicked with authority entered with a folder in her hand. Dr. Sarah, she said with a cold, calculating voice, we need to talk. Now! Sarah visibly tensed. Matt turned and his stomach contracted when he recognized the newcomer. Victoria, he murmured, and the name left his lips like a curse. Victoria walked toward them with that smile Matt knew all too well. Cold, calculated, and dangerous. It was the same expression she used when running meetings at her real estate company where he'd worked years ago. Matt, what a surprise to see you here, Victoria said with false sweetness, but her eyes remained fixed on Sarah. Doctor, I need you in my office to review some protocols. Not now, Victoria. I have an emergency, Sarah replied without looking up from Emma's chart. It's not a request, Doctor, it's an order. Matt intervened, positioning himself between both women. Victoria, my daughter is seriously ill. Let her work. Do you remember when you promised me you'd come back? Sarah suddenly murmured, looking at Matt with crystal-clear eyes. But you left with the scholarship to Boston, he replied, confused. What scholarship, Matt? I never received any scholarship. Victoria visibly tensed. Her hands squeezed the folder until her knuckles turned white. In Matt's mind, memories began to fit together like puzzle pieces. 15 years ago, in his father's office, Victoria had shown him a letter, supposedly from Sarah, saying she'd won a full scholarship to study medicine in Boston. She doesn't think about you anymore, Matt, Victoria had told him that day. She already has a boyfriend there. It's time you closed that chapter. But now, looking at Sarah's genuinely surprised expression, something didn't add up. I waited for your return for months, Sarah whispered. I went to your mom's house every day asking about you. Nobody knew how to tell me anything. That's impossible, Matt murmured. Victoria told me that. Victoria told you what? Sarah asked, turning toward the administrative director. Victoria pretended to check her watch. This is very touching, but we have work to do. Doctor, my office. Now. I'm not moving from here until you explain what happened with my scholarship, Sarah said, planting herself firmly. I don't know what you're talking about, Victoria lied, but a drop of sweat appeared on her forehead. Just then, Emma's monitor began emitting a constant alarm. All three adults turned toward the gurney, where the girl began convulsing weakly. Code blue in room 304, a nurse shouted. Chaos erupted in seconds. Nurses ran toward the room, while Sarah lunged toward Emma, immediately checking her vital signs. I need diazepam, 5 milligrams, now, Sarah shouted while holding Emma's head to prevent her from getting hurt. Matt watched paralyzed as his daughter's little body shook uncontrollably. What's happening to her? Her body is reacting to something. I need those studies now, Sarah replied, applying the medication that had just arrived. The convulsions gradually stopped, but Emma remained unconscious. Her breathing was labored, and her skin had taken on a grayish tone that terrified Matt. I need a CT scan, complete blood work, and a lumbar puncture, Sarah ordered the head nurse. Doctor, you'll need administrative authorization for those studies, the nurse interrupted, looking nervously toward Victoria. Then authorize them, Sarah demanded, turning toward Victoria. I'm sorry, Doctor, but there are protocols. I need to check if insurance covers those costs, Victoria replied coldly. Protocols, no. This is revenge, Sarah exploded, dangerously approaching Victoria. I'll pay everything out of pocket, Matt intervened desperately. Cost doesn't matter. Even so, I must review internal protocols, Victoria insisted, crossing her arms. Sarah looked at her with pure hatred. This child is dying, and you're playing with her life because of your damn pride. Watch your words, Doctor. I can have you removed from the case for inappropriate conduct. You know what? Sarah murmured, taking off her white coat. I don't need your authorization to save lives. She walked to her bag and pulled out her phone. I'm calling Dr. Johnson at University of Chicago Medical Center. He can do those studies without so much bureaucracy. If you take that patient out of this hospital without authorization, you'll face legal consequences, Victoria threatened. Matt couldn't take it anymore. He approached Victoria with clenched fists. My daughter isn't a game, Victoria. If something happens to her because of you, are you threatening me? Before he could answer, Emma's monitor emitted a different alarm, sharper and constant. Everyone turned toward the screen, where the numbers were dropping dangerously. Emma had stopped breathing. Ambu bag, now! Sarah shouted while beginning CPR on Emma. Sarah's expert hands worked on the child's small chest while Matt watched horrified. Victoria backed away toward the wall, finally understanding the gravity of the situation. 1, 2, 3, Sarah counted while pressing rhythmically. Come on, sweetheart, breathe for me. After what seemed like hours but were only minutes, Emma coughed weakly and began breathing on her own. The monitor showed stable vital signs again. Thank God, Matt murmured, wiping away tears he didn't know he'd shed. Sarah connected the artificial respirator and stayed next to Emma, monitoring every change. The girl was stable, but her condition remained critical. She needs those studies tonight or she won't survive until tomorrow, Sarah murmured, without looking at anyone. Victoria had quietly left the room, leaving Matt and Sarah alone for the first time in 15 years. The silence between them was dense, loaded with unanswered questions and accumulated pain. Do you know how many nights I waited for your call? Sarah whispered, adjusting Emma's IV. I waited for you too, Sarah. But I was told you already had a boyfriend in Boston, Matt replied, moving closer to her. What? I was never in Boston, Sarah exclaimed, turning toward him with eyes full of confusion and pain. Matt pulled out his wallet and extracted an old folded photograph. It was of both of them at the school fair, embracing next to a hot dog stand. I kept this all these years, and the letters I wrote but never sent, he murmured, showing her the photo. Sarah took it with trembling hands. I have the same photo at home, on my nightstand, next to your graduation letter. Victoria showed me documents about your scholarship. She told me you'd found someone else, that it was better if I forgot you. There was never a scholarship, Matt. There was never anyone else, Sarah sobbed. I waited until my mom forced me to enroll at university here in Chicago. I waited like an idiot. They looked into each other's eyes, finally understanding the magnitude of the manipulation that had destroyed their future together. Just then, a nurse burst into the room, gasping, "Doctor, the girl is convulsing again and not responding to medications." The second crisis was worse than the first. Emma convulsed violently while her temperature shot up to dangerous levels. Sarah worked frantically, applying medications that barely contained the symptoms. "I need those studies now, or this child is going to die," Sarah shouted toward the head nurse. "Where's the authorization?" "Director Victoria said we have to wait until tomorrow for committee review," the nurse replied, clearly uncomfortable. "Tomorrow will be too late." Matt couldn't contain himself anymore. He left the room furious, searching for Victoria through all the hospital corridors. He found her in her office, calmly reviewing papers as if nothing was happening. "You removed me from the case, and this child could die," Sarah had said minutes before when Victoria arrived with a removal order. "That's your opinion," Victoria had responded coldly. "No, Victoria, it's a medical fact, and you know it." Now, standing in front of Victoria's desk, Matt, trembled with rage. "What the hell is wrong with you? Are you willing to let my daughter die because of your jealousy?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Victoria lied, without looking up. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. The scholarship that never existed. The lies you told me about Sarah, everything." Victoria finally looked at him. "Prove it." "I don't need to prove anything to you. But I do need you to authorize those studies. The new protocol establishes that complex cases require supervision from multiple doctors. Sarah is too emotionally involved. She's the best doctor in this hospital. She was. She's no longer in charge of the case." At that moment, the door burst open. The hospital's general director, Dr. Anderson, entered with a thick folder under his arm and a serious expression. "Victoria, I just received a very detailed anonymous complaint about administrative irregularities. It includes documents from the internal system showing unauthorized modifications in academic files." Victoria paled. "Dr. Anderson, I can explain." "There's nothing to explain. Sarah returns immediately to the Emma case, and you have a disciplinary meeting tomorrow, first thing." Matt felt momentary relief, but his phone vibrated with a call that froze his blood. "Mr. Matt, this is Attorney Williams, representing your brother-in-law, Robert. He's on his way to pick up Emma. He has a temporary custody order." It was 3 in the morning when Sarah's phone rang insistently. She had formally resigned that afternoon, tired of fighting against Victoria's corrupt system, but when she saw Matt's name on the screen, she knew something terrible had happened. "Sarah, Emma is really bad. The doctors on duty don't know what to do. I need you." "Matt, I don't work there anymore. I'm not asking you to work. I'm asking you to save her as a friend, as the person who knows her case best." Sarah closed her eyes. She was already putting on her shoes before finishing the call. "Give me 20 minutes. She arrived at the hospital running, with messy hair and an old sweatshirt. She found Emma in critical condition, constant convulsions, 105-degree fever, and signs of respiratory failure. "What medications have you given her?" she asked the night nurse. "Everything in the standard protocol, doctor, but nothing works." Sarah reviewed the tests they had finally managed to do. Her suspicions were confirmed: rare autoimmune syndrome, almost impossible to diagnose without specific experience. "Shut up, Matt. This child is my patient, period," she yelled at him when he tried to tell her she didn't have to take responsibility anymore. Sarah knew exactly what to do, but the treatment wasn't officially approved in the United States. During the last few months, she'd studied similar cases in medical YouTube videos and papers illegally downloaded from American universities. "I need high molecular weight, intravenous immunoglobulin, and methylprednisolone in pulses." The specific combination she'd seen in a video from a Johns Hopkins doctor. "Doctor, that protocol isn't in our manuals," the nurse objected. "The manuals aren't going to save this child, but this will." Matt watched every movement, trusting her blindly. Sarah prepared the exact combination of medications, the doses she'd memorized from those nights of clandestine study. "If this doesn't work," she murmured. "It's going to work," Matt interrupted her. "I trust you." An hour later, the convulsions stopped. The fever began to drop gradually. Emma opened her eyes for the first time in hours and murmured weakly, "Daddy." Sarah and Matt hugged, crying with relief. But their celebration was abruptly interrupted when a tall, elegant man entered the room without knocking. "I'm here for my niece," Robert announced with an authoritative voice, showing legal papers. The courtroom of the Chicago family court was tense. Robert, Carol's brother, Matt's deceased wife, appeared impeccably dressed with his private attorney. He argued that Matt was an unstable father and that Emma needed a more structured environment. "Where were you when the child almost died?" Matt's lawyer asked during cross-examination. "Working to secure her future," Robert replied coldly. "And where were you when she cried for her mom every night?" "That's not relevant to this case." Sarah was called as a witness. With a firm voice, she explained Emma's medical condition and how Matt had been present at every critical moment. "Mr. Matt never left his daughter's side. He paid for expensive treatments, authorized risky procedures, and trusted medical judgment even when options were limited. Robert interrupted her. "Doctor, isn't it true that you and Mr. Matt have a romantic relationship that could affect your professional judgment?" "My relationship with Mr. Matt is irrelevant to evaluating his capabilities as a father," Sarah replied with dignity. That's when Robert played his cruelest card. "Your Honor, before continuing, I must reveal information that my sister Carol confided in me before dying. She had doubts about Emma's paternity." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Matt turned pale. "What are you insinuating?" the judge asked. "That there's a possibility Emma isn't Mr. Matt's biological daughter. My sister had an extramarital relationship during her marriage." Matt stood up furious. "That's a lie. Carol never." "Can you prove it, Mr. Matt?" The judge banged his gavel. "Order! This is a very serious accusation." Sarah observed Matt's devastated face and knew that regardless of biological truth, he had been the only father Emma had ever known. "Your Honor," Robert's lawyer intervened, "we request this hearing be suspended until appropriate tests are conducted." The judge sighed deeply. "Given the exceptional circumstances of this case, I order an immediate paternity test." The hearing resumes in a week with the results. Matt left the courthouse destroyed, but Sarah caught up with him in the parking lot. "It doesn't matter what that test says, Matt. You're her dad in everything that really matters." A week later, Matt returned to the courthouse with the sealed envelope containing the paternity test results. His hands trembled as he walked toward the courtroom, where Robert waited with a confident smile. Sarah accompanied him, squeezing his hand to give him courage. Emma, already completely recovered, had stayed with Sandra at the hospital. "It doesn't matter if it's not your blood, Matt," Sarah had told him the night before. "Why?" "Because love isn't inherited, it's built day by day, and you've built 4 years of unconditional love with that child." Now, facing the judge, the moment of truth had arrived. "Have you brought the results?" the magistrate asked. Robert stood up confidently. "Your Honor, I already reviewed the results that were sent to me. As I suspected, Mr. Matt is not Emma's biological father. Therefore, I request immediate custody be granted to me." Matt felt the world collapse under his feet. Sarah looked at him confused. "You reviewed what results?" the judge asked, frowning. "The ones that arrived by mail this morning," Robert replied, showing some papers. Sarah stood up abruptly. "Your Honor, those aren't the official results. I accompanied Mr. Matt to the certified laboratory, and I have the real results here." She pulled an official envelope from Northwestern Memorial Clinical Laboratory from her bag, still sealed. "May I?" the judge asked, taking the real envelope. He opened it and read silently. His expression gradually changed. "The official results confirm that Mr. Matt is Emma's biological father, with 99.9% certainty." Robert paled. "That's impossible." "Mr. Robert, where did you get those false documents?" Robert stammered, clearly caught in his lie. The judge banged his gavel. "Case closed. Custody remains completely with Mr. Matt and Mr. Robert, you'll be investigated for presenting false evidence before this court." They left the courthouse victorious. But 3 months later, in a small cafe in Lincoln Park, Sarah began feeling dizzy while drinking her favorite latte. "Are you okay?" Matt asked, worried when he saw her turn pale. "Matt, I think we need to talk." Sarah brought her hands to her belly where she already knew a new life was growing. She had confirmed her suspicions that morning with 3 different pregnancy tests, all positive. "A baby?" Matt asked with wide eyes. "Yes," she replied, nervous about his reaction. "Mine." "Who else's dummy?" Matt burst into laughter that made the whole cafe turn around. He stood up, picked her up, and spun her around while she screamed between laughs for him to put her down. "But we said we'd go slow," Sarah murmured when he set her down. "Well, the baby didn't get the memo," Matt replied, kissing her. That afternoon they went to pick up Emma from school. The girl ran toward them with her frozen backpack, completely unaware of the news that was about to change her life. Aunt Sarah, are you going to live together? Emma asked with the brutal honesty of 4-year-olds. Sarah and Matt looked at each other. They had talked about it, but without rush, without pressure. Would you like it if we lived together? Sarah asked, kneeling to her height. Yes, and I also want a little brother. I asked for one in church with Grandma Carol. Sarah froze. When did you ask for that? Like a month ago, when I saw you throwing up in the hospital bathroom, and I thought you were sick, but God told me in my dreams that you weren't sick, that you had a baby in your tummy. Matt and Sarah looked at each other amazed. Emma had known before them. So there really is a baby? The girl asked, excited. Yes, sweetheart, Sarah murmured with tears in her eyes. Emma hugged her tight. Will you be my real mom? I already am, sweetheart. I already am. 6 months later, in the garden of the house they bought together in River North, Matt was holding his newborn son Ryan, while Emma sang him lullabies she'd learned in kindergarten. Sarah watched them from the kitchen window with a cup of chamomile tea in her hands. She had finally found her place in the world, not just as a doctor, but as a mother, as a wife, as the woman who had fought for love and won. Sometimes, when destiny takes something away from you, it's just to give it back to you multiplied.